Hi there, my name is Karen Fabian and I'm the founder of Bare Bones Yoga. And this is video number 3, the last video in your 3-part free video series all about yoga anatomy. So if you're watching and you're a yoga teacher, which as I've said before is exactly who these videos are aimed at, you're in the right place. So in video number 1, we looked at a part of shoulder anatomy, external rotators. In video number 2, we looked at another part of shoulder anatomy, shoulder stabilizers. So today we're going to look at some muscles that are internal rotators of the shoulder. So in video 1, I talked about rotational movements of the shoulder and how those occur in the transverse plane, which divides the body into a top and a bottom. So I can externally rotate, I can internally rotate, I can do some other things as well, but let's just focus on the internal rotation part. So if you are like many of your students, you're probably sitting at your desk a lot all day with the hands facing down, and what that translates to if you work up the chain, so we talked about kinetic chains in video 1, is a turning in of the shoulders. And then if you're doing that a lot and you go to yoga class and you start to do things like plank and low push-up, you might also internally rotate. And you remember from video number 1, I was talking about that cue to trigger teres minor and infraspinatus to externally rotate the shoulders. But sometimes it's important to look at the muscles that do the converse, because for many of our students, the challenges come from that repeated postural position of hunching all day. And what happens when you do a lot of the same movement, or you sit in a particular position or move the body in a particular way on a repeated basis, is those muscles tend to get overly shortened. And so here we're talking about muscles that rotate the head of the humerus, the shoulder joint in. So it's got to be something on the front of the body. So you remember from video 1, I was talking about demystifying a lot of the mechanics and a lot of the information about anatomy. So just think, if I'm turning the shoulders in, it's got to be an action, a contraction, a shortening of muscle fibers in muscles that live on the front of the body. I can't turn the shoulders in using muscles that live on the back of the body. So it's got to be stuff somewhere around here, and it is. So there's another muscle of your rotator cuff that lives on the inside of your shoulder blade. It's called the Sub Scapularis. So just think about that. It's on the inside, so it's underneath. If you look at me from the front, it's right in here. So it's under, it's sub scapula. It sits on the inside of the scapula if you're looking at somebody from the front. So the Subscapularis is the third muscle of your rotator cuff. In video 1, we talked about teres minor and infraspinatus. Those are external rotators. Here we're talking about a third muscle of the rotator cuff, the subscapularis. Now, you probably know, because many people do, another big muscle group on the front of the body are the pectorals. So you've got your pec minor and your pec major, and they sit here on the front of the chest. These are also internal rotators. And then just to add in another one, we've got another muscle that runs right along the front here too. Let's just kind of stay around this area though of pectoral muscles and subscapularis to kind of stay in the same zone of rotator cuff and pec, something you're probably familiar with. So as we turn the shoulders in, you can see that it creates that hunching effect. And we don't want our students to come to class and hunch. I can only think of really one pose where we're asking students to internally rotate. And if you think for a moment, you might be able to think about it. It's kind of not a super common one, but I'll tell you. If you come into arch your arms, which you might do in Gomukhasana or cow face pose, if I kind of take the knees, imagine me sitting on the floor, you'll notice here that this shoulder is turned in. Right? So this shoulder's internally rotated while this shoulder's externally rotated. And then when I switch, this shoulder's internally rotated, this shoulder's externally rotated. So that's pretty much the only pose I can think of where we're actively internally rotating. Certainly when we have people in child's pose, they're kind of hunched towards the floor. That's more passive. But in something like Gomukhasana arms, archer arms, we're actually doing that external rotation. So as we, the internal rotation. As we internally rotate, we're stretching the external rotators and we're shortening the internal rotators. So that's a good reason to mix that into your classes so we start to stretch the muscles that turn the shoulders out. So just to kind of review, to pull things together, we talked about teres minor and infraspinatus living on the back of the body and inserting on the humerus. They're external rotators, external rotation being this action. Now we're looking at subscapularis, pec major, and pec minor, which are internal rotators, right? So we talked about that. Then in video 2, we talked about a shoulder stabilizer, the serratus anterior running from your ribs to the medial aspect of your scapula, and that's responsible for getting the shoulder blades more steady on the back, as in this action of pressing away from the floor in plank pose, kind of like that cat shape. So all these things together are part of the muscles that support the shoulders. Since we do so many things on the arms, weight bearing in yoga practice, it's really, really critical for yoga teachers to understand what the different muscles are, what they do, and how to cue to those muscles in understandable ways. But know that the only way that you can share this anatomy with your students in an understandable way is if you understand it yourself. And so through these lessons and through other lessons that I provide, I'll give you ways to break down the complex information in the subject of anatomy into understandable pieces so you can share it with your classes, make a bigger impact on your students, not only while you're teaching, but then when they're walking around and doing other athletic endeavors and sitting at their desks, they'll remember some of the cues and some of the ways that you translated that to everyday life while they were in class, and this will broaden your impact. Understanding anatomy is a great way also to build your confidence as a teacher, because you'll no longer need to wonder if the cues that you're sharing are anatomically correct. It's very common for teachers to pick up cues from other teachers or maybe from trainings, but they really don't have a full understanding of the anatomy behind it. I promise you, once you truly understand anatomy at a deep level, you'll be able to come up with lots of easy ways to share it with your students, and your confidence will soar because you'll no longer be wondering if what you're saying is correct. You'll know the anatomy and you'll be able to answer the questions with confidence. You'll be able to give your students, if they have questions, different things they could do while they're not in class, little mini sequences that they can do in between classes, and all of that will help increase your impact and increase your ability to be of service. And at the end of the day, that's really what we want to do as teachers. Be of service to our students, be of a help to them. So if you have any questions or feedback about any of these videos in this free series, please send me an email, Karen@barebonesyoga.com. Thank you so much for watching, and namaste.